بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف أنبياء الله والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المكرمين الغرر الميامين سيما بقية الله في الأراضين وحجته على الخلائق أجمعين سيدنا وإمام زماننا وصاحب نعمتنا وولي أمرنا مهدي هذه الأمة وطاووس أهل الجنة الحجة بن الحسن العسكري فداه أرواح العالمين. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The great, noble, purified mistress of the women of the worlds, Fatimatu Zahra, has said in her fiery sermon known as the Fadakiyah, that we spoke about in the last session, which tackles a great number of different challenges, not only theological or historical, but also political and social issues. She says in that sermon, أيها الناس ما هذه الغنيزة في حقي والسنة في ظلامتي ألم يقل رسول الله أن المرء يحفظ في ولده. O people, she says, why are you exhibiting weakness and inadequacy with regards to my rights that are being usurped, that are being confiscated, that are being taken away by the self-proclaimed government, the newly formed political establishment which had claimed succession to the Prophet without any legitimate grounds for such a claim. A government of which the first order of business was to confiscate the private property of not just any other citizen, but that of the daughter of the very founder of the nation, Lady Fatima. She had her private property, her inheritance, taken away by force by this newly formed government. And so, by shedding light on the illegitimate nature of this act, she exposes the true, evil, sinister nature of this government. And in doing so, she says, as we said, why are you, O people? And she's addressing all the people that were there. She's addressing you and I in the 21st century as well. Why are we exhibiting weakness when it comes to reclaiming the rights of the mistress of the women of the worlds, the greatest woman who ever lived? Why are we dozing off while she's being oppressed? And then she quotes the Prophet of Islam as having said that if you want to honor someone, you do so through their children. In other words, when Lady Fatima is not being honored, it is the Holy Prophet himself that is being desecrated. It is in fact the Prophet Muhammad who is being oppressed. And I'd like to take this moment to address all those people who are concerned about recent developments of the Holy Prophet of Islam being desecrated, being disrespected, being insulted in the media, be it in the print media or online media or on social networking sites, on cartoons, in movies. Here's what I have to say to all of you. Fatimatu Zahra is being insulted to this very day. And through her, the Prophet is being insulted. Do you not care about that? If some ignorant person on the other side of the globe decides to sit down and create an image for the Holy Prophet that is nothing but a figment of his imagination, that does not conform with reality, It contradicts historical reality and historical narratives. We all know that. And though we condemn any such acts, at the same time we know that they're originating from pure ignorance. They are being created as a side effect of not knowing the true, beautiful, pristine, merciful, compassionate nature of the Prophet. And that's where you and I come into the equation. We need to step up and make sure that the world knows just how great this Prophet was. So that the stereotypes that have been created by Wahhabis across the world isn't projected on the image in the minds of non-Muslims of who the Prophet really was. This is one of the most heinous crimes of the Wahhabi religious establishment, of the Takfiri religious order, which has exposed its true nature to the world through acts of terrorism, through statements that are counterintuitive and statements that are contradictory to human logic, and to an image that they've projected to the world that is anything but nice and beautiful. And as a side effect of that, they have, whether it being inadvertent or deliberate, I don't want to speculate on that, though I think that in some cases it certainly is deliberate. At least the forces underneath, acting behind the curtains, behind the scenes, are deliberate in galvanizing this sect, this group, this movement, so that the Prophet of Islam is insulted, so that Islam itself is desecrated. And so here I say to all of you, my dear viewers, my very respected brothers and sisters, that if you truly want to defend the Prophet, if you truly care about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wa alihi, and if you really want to honor him, you honor him through honoring his daughter. You honor Fatima. And it's this Fatima who says, why are you dozing off when you see me being oppressed? Why are you neglecting me at my time of need? Why are my rights being confiscated? Now, in this session, I'd like to draw your attention to a very important concept. That concept has to do with what it means to be a true Muslim. Let me give you some context here. To be a Muslim, we all know, you need to make the testimony of faith, the Shahada, as it's commonly referred to. And the testimony of faith involves someone saying that there is no God but God, known to us through His most noble, most all-encompassing, greatest name of all, Allah. There is no God but Allah. And Muhammad is His messenger. You have to believe in all the prophets, including the Prophet Muhammad, as the last and final messenger of God. Now the question arises as to whether or not a person is considered Muslim simply for making this declaration. Will you be a Muslim while making the declaration, and on the other hand, committing every single act which goes against and contradicts the statement? Would that be an acceptable form of subscription to the faith? And of course the answer is not quiet. Because although you will be considered a Muslim, meaning that you will be awarded the same rights and responsibilities that any Muslim would have, but you are not considered a true Muslim unless your acts, your deeds, are compatible with the testimony of faith, with the declaration of faith. In other words, all scholars, Shia, Sunni, old, new, contemporary, ancient, they all agree on one point, and that is that if a person who claims to be a Muslim willingly and deliberately refuses to pray, the 5 prayers that are prayed on 3 separate occasions every single day, then that person is a kafir. And a kafir is one who is not a Muslim. The antithesis of a Muslim is a kafir. And so, what happened to the declaration of faith? Well, while the declaration of faith is there, at the same time there needs to be a sense of compatibility between the declaration and action. So if a person says, I do not wish to pray, or more still, if a person does not acknowledge one of the pillars of the faith, or one of the branches of the faith. The pillars, of course, if you don't acknowledge those, you're not a Muslim to begin with. But if you fail to acknowledge or refuse to accept one of the branches of Islam, for instance, if you say fasting is not a part of Islam, praying is not a part of Islam, going to Hajj on the pilgrimage is not a part of the faith, then again, you're not considered to be a Muslim. Now, in certain circumstances, such an individual continues to receive the rights and protections of being a Muslim. However, that person is by no means considered to be a Muslim in the eyes of God. Having said that, here's another, perhaps narrower concept that I'd like you to consider. What does it mean to be a follower of the Ahlul Bayt? Does it end by simply accepting the succession of the Prophet by Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, alayhi salatu wassalam? Is that all there is to it? Well, of course, the answer is no. You need to make the declaration of faith, which includes your belief in the divine appointment of the commander of the faithful, the master of believers, Imam Ali, to be the successor of the Prophet of Islam. That is certainly the first step on top of the basic declaration of being a Muslim. However, you must also believe in the branches of the religion. You must believe in the broad general concept of the faith to be accepted as a follower of the Ahlul Bayt. For instance, if you believe in Imam Ali but choose to not believe in perhaps the savior of mankind, the awaited Imam al-Mahdi, again, you're not considered to be a follower of the Ahlul Bayt. It is, after all, a package deal. You either take it or leave it. If you wish to be considered a follower of the Ahlul Bayt, a Shia of Ali ibn Abi Talib, you must believe in the ones that were appointed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after Ali ibn Abi Talib. In fact, our greatest scholars, including Allama Muhammad Baqir al-Majlisi, may Allah be pleased with him and raise him among the Ahlul Bayt and raise his status on the Day of Judgment, one of our greatest scholars, he says in one of his books in which he outlines the basic structure of our creed, our belief, Aqa'idul Allam al-Majlisi as the book is called, and it's a highly recommended book for those of you who understand either the Arabic language or the Farsi language. And in that book, Allam al-Majlisi goes into the intricacies of the faith and says that if one chooses not to believe in those, he is not considered to be a Shia. And we have narrations from the Ahlul Bayt in which they say, "Laysa minna," he is not one of us who does not believe in so and so. Or "Laysa minna," he is not one of us who does not act in a certain way. And so, if a person, for instance, decides to reject the idea of marriage, and there's a difference between that and one who simply chooses not to get married for whatever circumstances they have, which of course is not an accepted lifestyle as Muslims. As Muslims, we are meant to get married and to raise families. La ruhbaniyata fil Islam. There is no monk-like lifestyles in Islam. You don't go and live in a cave and seclude yourself from the rest of society. You have to engage with the social atmosphere. But if one chooses not to get married for whatever reason, that's different from one who says that the concept or the establishment of marriage is invalid and has no basis in Islam. If one says such a thing, he is no longer a Muslim, no longer a follower of the Ahlul Bayt. There are other examples, but I don't want to go there. What I want to make very clear in this session is that to be a true follower of the Ahlul Bayt, there is a whole host of things that you need to believe in and accept, so that the proclamation that you make, so that the declaration that you make, so that the creed and the belief is compatible with everything else in your life. People make mistakes. Who doesn't? Nobody's perfect, as they say. Apart from the Ahlul Bayt and those who try very, very hard to be perfect. And there are people like that. So I don't agree with the basic premise of the proverb there. But at the end of the day, as human beings, we make mistakes. And that's different from someone who deliberately and consistently chooses to refuse to accept the truth as it has been handed down to us by God's messengers and apostles and the successors of the prophets, simply because it doesn't suit them or it's inconvenient for them. Having said that, let me draw your attention to a hadith. In this hadith, Imam Muhammad al-Baqir, if I'm not mistaken, or Imam Zayn al-Abidin Ali ibn al-Hussein, he says, and I quote, مَنْ لَمْ يَعْرِفْ مَا أُتِيَ عَلَيْنَا مِنْ ظُلْمِنَا وَذَهَابِ حَقِّنَا وَمَا رُكِبْنَا بِهِ or وَمَا نُكِبْنَا بِهِ فَهُوَ شَرِيكُ مَنْ أَتَى بِذَلِكَ عَلَيْنَا. It's a very powerful hadith, so bear with me while I translate and try to explain it. The Imam says that he who does not know the calamities and the afflictions and the tribulations that befell us, in other words, the Ahlul Bayt, if one does not know those tragedies, then he or she is a partner to the parties, a partner to the individual or the group that brought down those afflictions upon us. How could you believe in Imam al-Hussein and not know what happened on the most tragic day of Ashura? It's plain and simple common sense. How could you believe in Imam al-Hasan and not know what happened to him and how he was killed and murdered? How could you believe in Imam Ali and not know how he was murdered and how he was assassinated by means of the poisoned sword of Ibn Muljam al-Muradi? May Allah curse him for all eternity. How could you believe in the Ahlul Bayt and in Islam and in the Prophet and not know what happened to his daughter Fatima al-Zahra? How could you? It's common sense for one who loves another person to know everything there is to know about how they were killed, if that were the case. It's like, and this is just an example, imagine, God forbid, if someone had killed your father, someone had killed your mother, someone had killed your partner, and then you turning around and saying, well, I'm not so sure what happened. How could you care about them and not know who did it, how it was done, and why it was done, under what circumstances? You would pursue the truth of the matter all the way to the grave if it meant doing that. If that's what it takes, you would do it. You would never give up trying. You would never give up hope. And so when it comes to the Ahlul Bayt, who are greater than our fathers and mothers and partners and families, they're greater than anything else, anybody else. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made them so. How could we not know what happened to them? And so from this, I want to take you on a journey to what happened to Fatima al-Zahra, which of course is a question that inconveniences a lot of people in this day and age. The question of the tragedies that befell Fatima al-Zahra is one that disturbs a lot of sleeping minds. It's one that makes many people quiver and shiver. It sends a shiver down the spine of many, many people around the world who don't want to see the status quo being challenged. They don't want to see the established government-sanctioned version of history to be disturbed in any way. And as I mentioned in the previous session, there are many people who have one mission and one mission alone, and that is to cover the truth, to sweep it under the carpet, and to make sure that this conspiracy is never revealed to the masses, because for it to be revealed means that many of the established beliefs would have to be challenged. It means that much of the recorded history of Islam would have to be rewritten. And that's something they can't take. Because it means they'll have to cross out many individuals that were previously seen as holy and sacrosanct, almost divine. They can't even be touched. The companions, you can't even touch them. They're so pristine. They're so great. And in doing so, these people have created this holier-than-thou, sort of almost divine image of the companions. Almost like the founding fathers in America. Our American viewers could probably relate to that. When we talk about the founding fathers, oh, well, they're on a completely different plane, right? A patriotic American would revere the founding fathers. They would almost revere them as gods. Not so much gods, but they're the founding fathers. Which of course is unacceptable. You'd have to scrutinize every single human being if you're going to take them as your leader. You can't just assume the best, give them the benefit of the doubt. I mean, some of these founding fathers, and I mean no disrespect in any way, but they had slaves. And I'm not talking about the kind of slavery that was sanctioned by Islam, where it was enemy combatants that were taken into custody, given a certain degree of flexibility and freedom, and let into the, to go freely within society in exchange for services offered or rendered to their masters. That's not the kind of slavery I'm talking about. I'm talking about the slavery that was practiced in the most brutal way, where entire ships would be dispatched to Africa. They'd dock at a port and they'd round up random people from the street, all these African people, all these black people. They'd put them on the ship, take them back to Europe or to North America and sell them as slaves. We're not talking about enemy combatants here. We're not talking about people who take part in the battle and kill you. We're talking about completely innocent people who don't know what's going on. And so the founding fathers, not only did they have slaves and practice slavery in that form, but we hear stories of some of them even going up to reaching the level where one would go to one of his slaves. He would order all of his teeth to be plucked out, to be taken out, because he needed new teeth. And then he would take all those teeth and he would plant them into his mouth. I mean, that's just a thought. I'll leave you with that. But the point I'm trying to make is that some people have created this sort of holier-than-thou kind of image for the companions. And whenever you want to scrutinize them, whenever you want to criticize them, whenever you want to subject them to the normal level of scrutiny that you would subject anyone They suddenly tell you, well, no, you can't talk about the companions like that, simply because they happen to precede us in chronological order, simply because they had to be with the Prophet or have seen the Prophet or have interacted with the Prophet. Well, that of course is an honor if you apply the teachings of the Prophet. Otherwise, the idolaters saw the Prophet and interacted with him. That doesn't make them any more special than people who never got the chance to see the Prophet. And so, if you ever wanted to criticize them, they would tell you, no, you can't talk about them like that. Because the companions are like your father and your mother. They're like your parents. And even if your parents ever have a fight, you don't go and meddle into the fight. You don't try to take sides with one of your parents against the other. You never do that. You try to help out. And if you can't help, if you can't resolve the conflict, at least you stay out of it. Notice how the deceitful argument is proceeding. They then say, and you know, if they happen to have a fight or a conflict, that doesn't mean that they don't love you. You know, your parents, if they ever have a fight, doesn't mean they don't love you, honey. They really do love you. They still love you. Which of course sounds good on face value. It's an argument that, well, a lot of people listen to and they say, well, you're right. The companions must be awarded that level of respect at least. But the truth, the very bitter truth is this. If my parents, God forbid, and of course this is impossible, but for argument's sake, if my parents ever got involved in a bloody fight where one of them ended up killing the other, you be damn sure that I'm going to take sides. I will stand by the oppressed, and I will do whatever it takes to prevent bloodshed from happening. After all, the companions were normal human beings. Nobody claims that they were error-free or sinless angels. We all know that like any other sample population, they had the good, the bad, and the ugly. They had people who were true to their words. They had people who stood by the Prophet. They had people who protected his family and his message. They had people whose acts and deeds were compatible with their creed. While on the other camp, you had people who were simply politicians, individuals who had ulterior motives, people who would subscribe to the faith only in order to reach political ambitions, people who decided to join the ranks of the Muslim only after the Prophet of Islam returned to reclaim his native city of Mecca in a bloodless war where the Prophet came back. And it became abundantly clear to everyone, to all of the enemies of Islam, that this religion was going to prevail. That any idea of resistance was futile. It was not going to yield any sort of positive results in any way, shape, or form. People like Muawiyah and his father Abu Sufyan and his son Yazid, they became Muslims having realized that it was a zero-sum game, that they were not going to get anywhere fighting the Prophet and confronting him with force. So if you can't beat them, you join them. And join them they did. And by doing so, they planted the seeds of the greatest cancer that this religion has ever had to experience. A cancer that grows at the cellular level, becomes a tumor, then becomes a dangerous, dangerous object and disease that would destroy Islam from within, and that would project a very hostile, very perverted, very twisted, very manipulated and terrible image of this religion, which is what we're seeing in this day and age, unfortunately. And this is only the result of this malignant tumor that we call the state of hypocrisy that some of these companions, so-called companions, created within the religion of Islam. Inshallah, In the next session, we'll take this yet another step further, and we'll talk more about the specifics of what happened and how and under what circumstances those events occurred, using the established historical narrative as recorded by the Sunni school of thought, inshaAllah. So join me next time. Expect the unexpected. Keep an open mind. Accept the truth when you hear it. If I ever say anything that is other than the truth, you are more than welcome to reject it. But if it's the truth, and you will know when it's the truth, please make sure you're accepted. Because not knowing, as I said earlier, according to that hadith, is tantamount to carrying out the crime itself. هذا والحمد لله رب العالمين وصل اللهم على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين.